Our poor girl in a wheelchair sits alone in the corner of the orphanage. When the young billionaire arrives to make a donation, she says, tearfully, "Nobody ever chooses me, not even my dad." Upon hearing this, he looks at her face and is stunned. The grey sky matched Ethan Mitchell's mood on that Thursday morning. His car slid through the city streets while he mentally reviewed the day's appointments. The meeting with his accountant had ended earlier than expected, leaving a 2-hour gap in his schedule, enough time to fulfill a promise he had made to himself. Ethan adjusted his navy blue tie and checked the envelope on the passenger seat. The check was signed, a substantial amount for the Hope Children's Home. He could have simply mailed it or made a wire transfer, as he usually did, but something pushed him to deliver it personally this time. "Anonymous donations are more dignified," he repeated to himself while driving, as if he needed to justify his preference for anonymity. He didn't want recognition. He didn't need his name on a plaque on the wall. He was just doing what he believed was right. The GPS announced his arrival at the destination. Ethan parked and observed the 2-story building in front of him. Painted in faded yellow, it had a small garden at the entrance that tried to give the place a cheerful look. A red swing swayed alone in the light morning breeze. He took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. Social interactions had never been his strong suit, especially with strangers. At 38, Ethan had built a solid career in real estate, keeping his personal life as orderly and predictable as his financial spreadsheets. "They're just kids," he murmured to himself, straightening his suit as he walked toward the entrance. "And adults who take care of them? Nothing complicated." The entrance door had an old intercom. Ethan pressed the button and waited, holding the envelope more tightly than he needed to. "Hope Children's Home, good morning," a woman's voice crackled metallically through the speaker. "Good morning, my name is Ethan Mitchell. I'd like to make a donation, if possible." A buzzing sound indicated that the door was unlocked. Ethan entered a small foyer with light ceramic flooring. Colorful posters and children's drawings decorated the walls. A middle-aged woman, her graying hair in a simple bun and wearing a floral apron over casual clothes, appeared smiling. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Claire Thompson, the orphanage director. It's a pleasure to meet you." Ethan shook the hand she offered, noticing how firm her grip was, contrasting with her gentle appearance. "The pleasure is mine." "Has brought a contribution." He handed her the envelope, feeling strangely nervous. "That's wonderful. Any help makes a huge difference for our children." Claire accepted the envelope without opening it. "Would you like to see a bit of our place? We rarely have donors come in person. Most prefer just to do bank transfers." "I don't want to be a bother." "Not at all." The children are having recess. Some visitors came to meet a few of them today, so it's a bit busier than usual. Ethan hesitated. His initial plan was just to drop off the check and leave, returning to his orderly, predictable office. But something in Claire's genuine smile made him nod in agreement. "All right, if it's not an inconvenience." "Great. This way, please." Ethan followed Claire down a hallway decorated with more children's drawings. The walls needed a fresh coat of paint, and he noticed some cracks in the ceiling. Mentally, he calculated how much a complete renovation would cost. "We currently have 23 children, between ages 2 and 12, Claire explained as they walked. "Some are in the process of adoption, others just arrived. We do our best to make them feel at home, even if only temporarily." They passed by an improvised classroom where younger children were coloring under the supervision of a young volunteer. A few looked at Ethan curiously, and he waved awkwardly. "This is our little library." Claire pointed to a room with low bookshelves filled with books. "And here is the cafeteria." Ethan observed everything with growing interest. The place was modest but clean and organized within its limitations. The children seemed well cared for despite the obviously limited resources. "And this is our patio, where the kids spend most of their free time." Claire opened a door leading to an outdoor area covered by an awning. The space was simple, a few scattered toys, a small makeshift sports court, and some colorful benches. About 10 children played in small groups while 3 adults supervised. In one corner, a few couples spoke with specific children, likely prospective adoptive parents. "Today is visiting day for potential adoptions," Claire explained, confirming Ethan's suspicions. "It's always a special day for the kids." Ethan nodded, suddenly feeling out of place. He was about to thank Claire and ask to leave when something caught his eye. Separated from the groups, nearly hidden under the shade of a small tree in the corner of the patio, was a little girl in a wheelchair. She looked about 4 years old, with light brown hair tied into 2 uneven braids, wearing a simple blue dress. Unlike the other kids, she wasn't playing or talking to the visitors. She just watched everything with large, attentive eyes. "Who is that girl?" Ethan asked, discreetly pointing. Claire followed his gaze and smiled with a hint of sadness. "That's Grace. She's been with us for almost a year. She's a special child." "Special?" "Yes, in every way. Very smart for her age, but she also faces physical challenges. She lost the use of her legs after an accident when she was 3. Ethan kept watching the girl. There was something in her posture, in the way her eyes followed the other children, that piqued his curiosity. "Why is she alone?" Claire sighed. "Grace has trouble connecting with the other kids. And, well, families that come usually look for children without additional complications." Ethan felt a pang of indignation. Complications. Unfortunately, many families hesitate when it comes to adopting children with special needs. It requires more dedication, more resources. Grace needs regular physical therapy, and she'll likely face other challenges as she grows. Without realizing it, Ethan started walking toward the girl. Claire didn't stop him. She just followed a few steps behind. Grace noticed their approach. Her deep brown eyes fixed on Ethan with a mix of curiosity and caution. Up close, he could see freckles across her small nose and cheeks, and an almost imperceptible scar near her right eyebrow. "Hello, Grace," Claire said gently. "This is Mr. Mitchell. He came to visit us today." Ethan suddenly felt nervous, as if about to give a critical presentation. He crouched down to meet the girl's eye level. "Hi, Grace. You can call me Ethan." The girl studied him for a few seconds before responding. "Did you come to see the kids too, like those people over there?" She pointed to the couples happily chatting with other children. "Not exactly," Ethan replied honestly. "I just came to get to know this place." Grace nodded, as though that made perfect sense. "It's nice here," she said, though her tone didn't match the words. "Yes, it is," Ethan agreed. Then, following a sudden impulse, he asked, "Don't you want to play with the other kids?" A sad smile flickered across Grace's lips, so brief that Ethan almost missed it. "They run a lot. I can't keep up." She patted the wheel of her chair, "And some of them are scared. They think it's contagious, like the flu." The simplicity with which she explained her situation caught Ethan off guard. There was no self-pity in her voice, just a surprising acceptance for someone so young. At that moment, another staff member called Claire, and she excused herself, leaving Ethan alone with Grace. An uncomfortable silence hung between them for a few seconds. Ethan wasn't used to talking to children and didn't quite know how to proceed. "Do you work a lot?" Grace asked suddenly. "Yes, quite a bit." "How do you know?" "Your clothes, and you look tired." She spoke with the brutal honesty typical of children. Uncle James, who used to take care of the garden here, had that same look. He said working too much makes people look like squeezed lemons. Ethan couldn't help but laugh. "I think he was right. Sometimes I do feel like a squeezed lemon." Grace nodded seriously, as if they were discussing a matter of utmost importance. "Do you have kids?" The question caught Ethan by surprise. "No, I don't." "Why not?" "I never found the right time." Grace frowned, clearly dissatisfied with the answer. "Adults always say that. The right time. Like they have a magic clock telling them when things can happen." Ethan smiled again, impressed by the girl's insight. "You're right. I guess the truth is, I never found the right person to start a family with." Grace seemed to evaluate his response. "Have you ever wanted a daughter like me?" The question startled him completely. "Like you? A smart, observant little girl?" "No, a broken one." Ethan's heart clenched. "Broken?" "Yeah, one who can't walk right." "Who needs this chair?" She tapped her wheelchair again. "People always pick kids who work properly." Ethan felt a knot in his throat. He crouched again, looking directly into her eyes. "Grace, you're not broken. That wheelchair is just a different kind of transportation. Some people prefer cars, others like bikes." She shrugged, not looking very convinced. "The adults who come here don't think that way." Ethan followed her gaze toward the couples interacting with the other children. None of them had even glanced at the corner where Grace was. "They're missing the chance to meet a very special girl," he said sincerely. Grace stared at him as if trying to determine whether he was being honest or just offering empty comfort like so many adults before. What she said next hit Ethan like a punch. "Nobody ever chooses me. Not even my dad." The words were heavy with a sadness too big for such a small body. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it, like stating that the sky was cloudy, a simple fact without drama or self-pity. Ethan felt something strange in his chest, a mix of compassion, indignation, and an emotion he couldn't name. She was only 4, yet she already had a grasp of rejection that many adults never experience. "For your dad, Ethan tried to find the right words, but Grace interrupted him. "He left after the accident, Miss. Claire said he was very sad and needed time to think, but he's been thinking for a long time now." The way she described her abandonment so plainly left Ethan speechless. He wanted to say something comforting, to promise her that her father would return, but he couldn't bring himself to lie to those sincere eyes. "Sometimes adults make mistakes, Grace, big mistakes. Because of me." "No," Ethan replied more firmly than he intended. "Never because of you. Adults are responsible for their own mistakes, not you." Grace seemed to reflect on this, absently tugging at the hem of her dress. "Do you want to see my drawing?" The abrupt topic change was typical of children, but Ethan suspected she just didn't want to talk about her father anymore. "I'd love to." She opened a small compartment on the side of her wheelchair and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Unfolding it revealed a drawing of a simple house with a colorful garden and a figure that looked like her, next to a shape Ethan couldn't immediately identify. "Is that a dog?" he asked, pointing to the shape. Grace laughed, a surprisingly light and melodic sound. "No, it's a cat. Can't you see the pointy ears?" "Ah, of course, the pointy ears. Silly me. I never had a real cat, but I like them. They're independent, you know. They don't need someone helping them all the time." Ethan understood the implicit comparison. "Would you like to have a cat one day?" "Yes. I already picked a name, Popcorn, because it's funny and cheerful." "That's a great name," Ethan agreed, genuinely charmed by her enthusiasm. At that moment, Claire returned, looking a bit surprised to see the two of them chatting so animatedly. "I see you two got along well," she commented with a smile. "Mr. Ethan liked my drawing of Popcorn," Grace explained. "Popcorn? Oh, the imaginary cat." Claire winked at Ethan. "Grace has an entire collection of drawings of that cat. They're studies," Grace corrected with seriousness, "for when I have a real one." "Of course, they're studies," Claire agreed, then turned to Ethan. "Unfortunately, we can't have pets here for practical reasons and because some children have allergies." Ethan nodded, understanding. A thought began to form in his mind, but he pushed it aside. It wasn't the right time. "I need to get back to work," he finally said, checking his watch. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Grace. Will you come back?" The question came quickly, almost anxiously. Ethan hesitated. He hadn't planned on returning. His intention had always been to make an anonymous donation and continue with his organized life. But something in Grace's hopeful eyes made it impossible to say no. "Yes, I'll come back to see how you're doing." The smile that lit up her face was like the sun breaking through heavy clouds. For the first time, Ethan saw Grace as a typical 4-year-old, radiant, hopeful, believing in an adult's promise. Claire walked him to the exit, thanking him again for the donation. "Grace rarely opens up to strangers like that," she said as they walked. "You must have a special way with children, Mr. Mitchell." Ethan almost laughed. He had no experience with children and always avoided situations involving them. "I think it was just luck." "Maybe. Or maybe you two connected somehow. Grace is very good at reading people. She's not easily fooled by fake smiles or empty promises." As he said goodbye to Claire, Ethan realized he was already planning his next visit. Something about talking with Grace had awakened a strange feeling, a blend of responsibility and connection he had never experienced. The drive back to his office was filled with thoughts of the little girl. The way she talked about her father, about being broken, about never being chosen. It all resonated with Ethan more than he expected. Sitting in his leather chair behind a meticulously organized desk, Ethan realized something had changed. His office, once a refuge of order and predictability, now felt strangely empty. The spreadsheets on his computer, the contracts on his desk, the phone calls waiting, none of it seemed as urgent as it had a few hours before. Instead, his mind kept returning to a pair of brown eyes, two uneven braids, and a small voice saying, "Nobody ever chooses me, not even my dad." Ethan knew he should focus on work, commitments, responsibilities. But something had shifted irreversibly that Thursday morning. The little girl who had no one now had someone thinking about her. 3 days had passed since his encounter with Grace. Ethan adjusted his Thursday schedule, cancelling 2 meetings and postponing an important call. No one questioned his changes, one of the perks of being the boss. The route to the orphanage felt more familiar now. Ethan recognized the bakery on the corner, the bus stop with the broken bench, and the graffiti-covered wall that signaled he was close. This time, there was no donation envelope, just him and his restless thoughts. "It's just a quick visit," he muttered to himself as he parked. "Just to keep my promise." Pressing the doorbell, Ethan realized he was nervous. What if Grace wasn't there? What if she had forgotten him? 3 days was a long time for a child's perception. The door was opened by a young woman in a colorful apron whom Ethan didn't recognize. "Good morning, may I help you?" "Good morning, I'm Ethan Mitchell. I was here on Monday and would like to visit again." The young woman smiled. "Ah, yes, Claire mentioned you might come back. I'm Melissa, one of the caregivers. Please, come in." Melissa led him down the now familiar hallway to Claire's office. The director was on the phone but smiled when she saw Ethan and signaled for him to wait a moment. "Mr. Mitchell, it's great to see you again," Claire greeted him after ending the call. "I have to confess I wasn't sure you'd return so soon." "I promised," Ethan said simply. What he didn't say was that he had spent the last 3 days thinking about Grace, replaying their conversation, imagining what her life was like in this place. Claire nodded, as though she understood more than he had said. "Grace is in the patio, just like last time. It's a nice day, so the kids are enjoying the sunshine. Melissa can take you there." "Thank you." Following Melissa down the hall, Ethan noticed details he hadn't the first time. A bulletin board with photos of smiling children, some with their new parents, others on field trips and parties, announcements about medical appointments and extracurricular activities. A staff corner with a small coffee maker and well-worn cups. The sound of children's laughter grew louder as they approached the patio. When Melissa opened the door, the bright sunlight made Ethan blink a few times to adjust. Children ran about, played in groups, or drew chalk figures on the ground. Ethan scanned the area, looking for Grace. He didn't see her immediately and felt a pang of disappointment. "There's Grace," Melissa said, pointing to a shaded spot near a small tree. She was in the same place Ethan had first found her. Grace was not alone now. A young woman sat on a bench beside her, holding an open book. They seemed engaged in a story. "That's Sophia, our reading volunteer," Melissa explained. "She comes 3 times a week to read to the children." "Grace loves these sessions." Ethan hesitated, not wanting to interrupt. "I can wait until they're done." "Don't worry," Melissa said reassuringly. "Sophia is almost finished for the day. I'll let them know you're here." Melissa approached the two, said something Ethan couldn't hear. Grace immediately turned her head, wide eyes searching for him. When she spotted him, a bright smile lit her face, and Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. The young volunteer closed the book, exchanged a few words with Grace, and walked away with a wave at Ethan. He walked toward Grace, feeling strangely like he was reuniting with an old friend. "You really came back," Grace exclaimed as he approached. Her voice held no surprise, only satisfaction, as if confirming something she already knew. "I said I would," Ethan replied, sitting on the now vacant bench. "How are you?" "Good," Sophia was reading a story about a boy who finds a dragon in his backyard. The dragon was tiny, the size of a cat, and breathed colorful fire. Sounds like a great story. It is. The dragon and the boy become secret friends. No one believes the boy, so it stays their little secret. Ethan smiled at her enthusiasm. You like fantasy stories? I like all kinds of stories, Grace replied thoughtfully. But fantasy ones are special because anything can happen. Dragons, unicorns, magic. Even people like me can walk, fly, and do impossible things. The simplicity of those words hit Ethan hard. Of course, Grace would find in fantasy the freedom reality denied her. I brought something for you, Ethan said, pulling a small package from his jacket pocket. It's nothing big, but I thought you might like it. Grace accepted the package, eyes shining with curiosity. She carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal a small hardcover notebook decorated with cat illustrations on the cover and a case of colored pencils. You mentioned your popcorn drawings, Ethan explained. I thought you might like a special notebook just for them. Grace gazed at the gift, as though Ethan had given her a precious treasure. She ran her small fingers over the cover, opened the notebook to smell the fresh pages. It's so pretty, she whispered. I've never had a notebook of my own. We share everything here. Well, this one is just yours. You can draw whatever you like in it. Thank you. Her gratitude carried an emotion far beyond what the modest present warranted. Can I draw now? Of course. Grace opened the pencil case, carefully choosing a bright orange. With her tongue poking out in concentration, she began sketching what looked like a cat. Can I tell you a secret? She asked, not lifting her eyes from the drawing. Sure. I was afraid you wouldn't come back. The confession was quiet, almost a whisper. Ethan felt a squeeze in his chest. Why did you think that? Grace shrugged, still drawing. Adults always say they'll come back, or they'll call, or they'll send letters. But most never come. Ethan understood immediately that she wasn't just talking about visitors to the orphanage. I always keep my promises, Grace. She finally looked up, studying him with those eyes that seemed far older than her years. That's why I liked you from the start. You don't lie. How do you know I don't lie? Your eyes. Miss. Claire says I can see people's souls through their eyes. It's my superpower. Ethan smiled, charmed by the mix of maturity and childlike imagination. And what else does your superpower tell you? Grace tilted her head as though genuinely evaluating him deeply. That you're sad on the inside but try to hide it. That you work too hard because you're afraid of being alone at home. And that you were also a child who waited for someone who never came back. Ethan's smile froze. How could a 4-year-old be so perceptive? It was as if she had looked directly inside him and seen things he himself avoided facing. That's quite a superpower, he managed to say at last. Grace grinned, satisfied with herself, and went back to her drawing. It was a car, she said after a few minutes of silence. A car. That made me like this. She pointed to her legs. A big black car. I don't remember much, just flashes, noise, then pain, then bright lights at the hospital. Ethan didn't know how to respond. He hadn't asked about the accident, knowing it would be a sensitive subject. I'm sorry that happened to you. Me too, Grace said simply. The doctors said maybe I can walk again one day with a lot of physical therapy, but I'm not sure I believe them. Adults lie to make kids feel better. Not all of them. Some adults are honest, even when the truth is tough. Grace seemed to consider that as she added the finishing touches to her drawing. My dad wasn't honest, she said finally. He said he loved me a lot at the hospital. He said everything would be fine. But then he left. The statement, delivered without drama or self-pity, broke Ethan's heart. How could anyone abandon such a special child, especially when she needed support the most? Sometimes people get scared by difficult situations, he tried to explain, without excusing the inexcusable. Your dad probably got scared. Scared of me. No, never of you. Scared of the situation, the responsibility, maybe even scared he wasn't good enough to take care of you. Grace nodded slowly, processing those words. But he was my dad. Dads shouldn't be afraid to take care of their kids. They shouldn't, but some are. She sighed. a small sound but filled with resignation. "I finished my drawing," she announced, changing the subject. "Want to see?" Ethan took the notebook she handed him. The drawing showed two cats, a large one and a small one, sitting under what looked like a tree. "Is that Popcorn?" he asked, pointing to the smaller cat. "Yes, and that's his dad. In this story, they're having a picnic in the park." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. Even in her fantasy drawings, Grace created the family she didn't have. "It's beautiful, Grace. You have a lot of talent." The compliment made her smile shyly. "Can I draw you next time?" "I'd be honored." They spent the next hour talking about light topics. Grace told him about her daily routine at the orphanage, her favorite lessons, the book she was reading with Sophia. Ethan talked about his job, simplifying so she could understand it, and was surprised when she asked perceptive questions about buildings and construction. "I want to build buildings when I grow up," Grace revealed. "Not just pretty ones, but special ones." "Special how?" "Buildings anyone can go into, with ramps instead of just stairs, wide doors for wheelchairs, and buttons everyone can reach." Ethan smiled, impressed yet again. "That would be amazing, Grace. The world needs buildings like that. Would you help me? When I grow up, I mean, you know about these things." The innocent question, assuming a future where they'd still be connected, touched Ethan deeply. "Of course," he said, realizing he truly meant it. "You could be my junior partner." Grace's eyes lit up at the idea. "Junior partner, that sounds important. Very important. We'd have to make special business cards just for you," she laughed, a clear sound that seemed to brighten the whole patio. Time passed too quickly. Soon, Melissa appeared to say it was lunchtime for the children. Ethan was surprised to see that 2 hours had gone by. "I have to go now, Grace," he said, standing from the bench. Her expression fell visibly, but she nodded. "That's okay. Adults have lots of things to do." "Yes, but—" Ethan hesitated, then made a decision. "Can I come back next week? Same day, Thursday?" Her face lit up again. "Promise?" "I promise. Thursday morning, I'll be here." "I'll make a drawing of you by then," she announced, hugging the notebook to her chest. "The best drawing in the world? I can't wait to see it." Melissa helped Grace put away her new pencils and notebook, then began pushing her chair toward the cafeteria. Ethan watched as the girl turned one last time, waving enthusiastically. He waved back with a smile he couldn't contain. On his way back to the car, he ran into Claire in the hallway. "It seemed like a good visit," she commented. "It was great. Grace is amazing." "Yes, she is special. She has a wisdom that goes beyond her age. I think difficult experiences can do that to people, even very young ones." Ethan nodded, thinking of his own childhood experiences. "I told her I'd come back next Thursday." Claire smiled, looking genuinely happy. "That will be wonderful for her. Grace needs consistency in her life. People who keep their promises." "I intend to be one of those," Ethan said, with a conviction that surprised him. During the drive back to his office, he reflected on the 2 hours he had spent with Grace. It was strange how natural it felt to talk to her, despite his lack of experience with kids. There was something about that girl that made him want to be better, more present, more reliable. Arriving at the parking garage of his office building, Ethan took out his phone and opened his calendar. He blocked every Thursday from 10 a.m. to noon as a recurring event titled simply Grace. His assistant would wonder, his partners might find it odd, but it didn't matter. For the first time in years, Ethan had something on his schedule that made him smile just thinking about it. It wasn't a business meeting or a client dinner. It was a silent promise made to a little girl in a wheelchair. And that promise, he knew for sure, would never be broken. The rain fell softly outside the orphanage windows. It was the third consecutive Thursday Ethan had visited Grace, but today they couldn't stay in the patio as usual. The staff had prepared a small activity room so they could talk. Grace seemed excited about the change. On the table in front of her lay several drawings, all in the notebook Ethan had given her. "Look at this one." She slid a drawing toward him. "It's you in your office, working on new buildings." Ethan smiled at the simplified figure of a man behind a giant desk, surrounded by papers. "You drew me looking so serious." "That's because you look serious when you talk about work," Not sad, just focused. Grace tilted her head. How's Mr. Squeezed Lemon today? It was now an inside joke between them. Ethan laughed and loosened his tie. Less squeezed today. I left the office early so I wouldn't be late. That's good. You need to work less. She spoke with the authority of someone much older, making Ethan smile again. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Grace shuddered slightly. Not a fan of storms? Ethan asked. Not really. The noise sometimes scares me. It reminds me. She stopped, looking at her hands. The accident? Grace nodded silently. Ethan noticed she rarely brought up that day, aside from brief mentions. Today, though, something about the quiet room and the steady rainfall seemed to invite deeper conversation. When I was little, I didn't like storms either, Ethan confessed. My mum worked the night shift as a nurse. I'd be alone at home and the thunder felt so loud. Grace looked up, curious. What about your dad? Didn't he stay with you? The question, so innocent, struck Ethan like a blow to the stomach. He took a deep breath before answering. My father left when I was 6. Grace's eyes widened. Like mine? Yes. A bit like yours. A silence settled between them. Not an uncomfortable silence, but one in which both seemed to process this new layer of connection. Why did he leave? Grace finally asked. Ethan gazed at the window, watching the rain. It was strange. Throughout his 38 years, he had rarely spoken about his father, not even to long-term girlfriends or close friends. And now he was about to open his heart to a 4-year-old. He and my mom fought a lot. One day, after a big fight, he left and never came back. He only left a note on the kitchen table. What did the note say? That he needed to find his own happiness, that he wasn't happy with us. The simplicity with which he could say that surprised Ethan. Perhaps it was easier to share with Grace because she, in a way, understood. That's sad, Grace commented. Parents should stay, even if they're not happy. Yes, they should. Did you cry? A lot. For many nights. Me too. Grace drew small circles on the table with her finger. Sometimes I still cry, but only when I'm alone. I don't want the other kids to see. Why not? Because they have their own reasons to cry. They don't need mine, too. The wisdom in those words from someone so young affected Ethan profoundly. He remembered himself at 8, deciding he wouldn't cry anymore, that he'd be strong for his mother and keep his pain hidden so as not to add to hers. You know, Grace, for a long time I thought I had to hide my sadness, like you. But now I see that's not always good. It's not good? No. Sometimes keeping it all inside only makes it hurt more. Grace considered this, her forehead creased in thought. But if I show I'm sad, people will think I'm weak. Or worse, they'll pity me. There's a difference between pity and compassion, Ethan explained gently. Pity is when someone looks down on you. Compassion is when someone stands beside you. Grace tilted her head, taking that in. And you're standing beside me now? Yes, exactly where I want to be. She smiled, a small but genuine smile. Tell me more about when you were little. Ethan took a deep breath. Memories he had long buried began to surface, some still painful even after all these years. After my father left, things got tough. My mum worked a lot, so I spent a lot of time alone. I learned to cook pasta when I was 8. I went to school alone, came back alone. Did you have friends? Not many. It was hard to bring them over or go to their houses because my mum was rarely available for that. When my dad left, did yours ever come back? Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, as if Grace dreaded the answer. He tried, years later. When I was 15, he showed up at our door. He wanted to reconnect, said he was sorry. Did you forgive him? Ethan hesitated, remembering the shock of seeing that older but still recognizable face, the anger he had felt, how he had slammed the door in the man's face. Not at that moment. I was still very hurt. I told him it was too late. And was it too late? The simple question made Ethan reflect. He had thought about this many times over the years. Maybe not. Maybe I should have given him a chance, but at that age, all I felt was anger. He missed my whole childhood, all the times I needed him. Like I need my dad now, Grace said softly. Yes, exactly that. If my dad ever comes back, I think I'll be angry too. But maybe I'd let him in. Why? Grace thought for a moment. Because maybe he's sad too. Maybe he needs me as much as I need him. The child's wisdom made Ethan swallow hard. How could a 4-year-old have such clarity on something he, as an adult, still struggled to understand? You really are special, you know that. Grace shrugged, a bit embarrassed by the compliment. I just think a lot. I have plenty of time to think here. Another loud rumble of thunder made Grace jump again. Ethan reached out, and she instinctively took his hand. You know what my mom did when I was scared of storms? He asked. She had me count to 10 between the lightning and the thunder. The bigger the number we got to, the farther away the storm was. Grace's eyes lit up with interest. Can we try it? Right then, a flash of light lit the room. 1, 2, 3. They began counting together. They got to 7 before the thunder rolled. It's 7 miles away, Ethan explained. Not that close. Let's do it again next time, Grace suggested, still holding his hand. They spent the next few minutes counting between lightning and thunder, noticing how the numbers grew as the storm moved away. Grace seemed calmer now, almost entertained by the new game. Did you have someone who counted with you when you were little? She asked between counts. I had my mom, even if she wasn't always around physically. She worked hard, but she loved me very much. And now, is she still... No, she passed away 5 years ago. I'm sorry, Grace said sincerely. My mum's gone too, in the same accident that... She looked at her legs. It was the first time Grace mentioned her mother. Ethan felt the weight of that double loss, the mother who was gone forever and the father who chose to leave. Do you remember her? Your mum? Grace nodded slowly. A little. She had hair like mine, only longer. She used to sing to me before bed. I don't remember her face clearly, but I remember feeling safe when she hugged me. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. That's a precious memory, Grace. Keep it always. The girl smiled sadly. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll forget everything someday. I understand that fear. I only have one photo of my whole family together, before my dad left. Sometimes I look at it and hardly recognize the happy boy I used to be. Grace studied him for a moment. But you look happy now. When you're here with me. Her observation surprised Ethan. She was right. These weekly visits had become the highlight of his days. You make me happy, Grace. Our conversations are the best part of my week. Her face glowed with a genuine smile. At that moment, another flash of lightning appeared, and they started counting automatically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The thunder sounded distant now. See, the storm's moving away, Ethan said. Yes, Grace agreed, glancing at their joined hands. This one is over now. They both knew they weren't talking only about the rain outside. Thursdays soon weren't enough. Ethan started stopping by in the late afternoons, after meetings was when traffic was calmer. He hadn't planned on changing his routine so drastically. It happened naturally, like a river finding its way among the rocks. In the second week of these visits, Grace surprised him with a simple question. Can you come again tomorrow? Ethan had an important meeting with investors the next day, a packed schedule as always. The automatic answer would be no. But something in Grace's hopeful eyes made him pause. I could try to come late in the afternoon. I can't promise, but I'll try. The next day, after rearranging 3 appointments and delegating a presentation to his assistant, Ethan drove to the orphanage. Grace's smile when she saw him walk into the patio was worth every minute of the meeting he had missed. You really came, she exclaimed, like it was a miracle. I said I'd try. In the 3rd week, Claire welcomed him with a curious expression. Mr. Mitchell, you're becoming a familiar face around here. I hope that's not a problem, Ethan said, suddenly worried. Not at all. It's wonderful for Grace, Claire smiled. Actually, I was thinking, maybe it would be helpful to establish a routine for these visits. Children benefit a lot from predictable patterns. That night, Ethan reorganized his entire work schedule. He delegated projects, postponed non-essential meetings, and created a new balance, allowing him to leave the office at 4 o'clock, 3 days a week. In less than a month, visiting the orphanage had become part of his regular routine. The staff now knew him by name. Melissa, one of the caregivers, would have his favorite tea ready when he arrived. Sophia, the reading volunteer, picked out books she thought Grace would like to share with him. The activity room became their space. Grace even called it our little corner. That's where they drew together, read stories, or just talked about their day. "I managed to do all my physical therapy without complaining today," Grace proudly told him one October afternoon. "Dr. Patricia said my muscles are getting stronger." "That's fantastic. I'm very proud of you." Ethan learned about her routine: physical therapy on Mondays and Wednesdays, music class on Tuesdays, library on Fridays. He knew which children were her friends, few but loyal, which teachers she liked best, and what made her smile or frown. Without noticing, Ethan began organizing his own life around these meetings. He woke up thinking of what he could bring for Grace that day: a new book, drawing supplies, or just an interesting story to tell. At work, he found himself researching buildings with inclusive designs, remembering her dream to create spaces for everyone. One afternoon, he arrived at the orphanage to find Grace with red, puffy eyes. "What happened?" he asked, concerned. "A couple came today. They talked to me. They were really nice, but I overheard them talking to Miss Claire afterward. They said they wanted a normal child." Her voice broke on the last word. Ethan felt a wave of anger and protectiveness. Without thinking twice, he sat beside her and gave her a gentle hug. "They're the ones who aren't normal if they can't see how incredible you are." Grace gave a sad smile. "It's okay, I'm used to it." "You shouldn't be. No one should get used to being treated that way." That night, driving back home, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Grace, alone in her room at the orphanage. Something had changed within him. The comfort of solitude he had once prized now felt empty. His apartment, once a refuge of peace and organization, now felt too big, too quiet. He imagined what it would be like to have colorful drawings on the fridge, children's books on the shelves, the sound of laughter filling the rooms. The next morning, he arrived at the office with pronounced dark circles under his eyes after a restless night. "Everything okay, boss?" his assistant Marcus asked. "Oh, yes, I just didn't sleep well." "You've been sleeping little lately. Is it these new afternoon commitments?" Ethan paused. It was true his work had been affected, not negatively. He still met deadlines, made solid decisions, but his mind was no longer 100% at the company. Part of it was always with Grace. "They're important commitments," he simply replied. Marcus nodded, asking no further questions. It was why Ethan valued him. He knew when to stop. The following week, during a meeting with the partners, Ethan noticed their exchanged looks when he mentioned he'd need to leave early again. "Ethan, we need to talk about your new routine," said Richard, the senior partner. "Is there a problem with my performance?" Ethan asked directly. "No, of course not. You're still as brilliant as ever. We're just curious. It's not typical of you to leave before sundown." Ethan hesitated. He hadn't told anyone about Grace. It was personal, too precious to share casually, but he realized he needed some explanation. "I'm doing volunteer work." It wasn't exactly a lie. He wasn't being paid. "Volunteer, you?" Richard seemed genuinely surprised. "Well, that's unexpected, but admirable." The meeting continued, but Ethan noticed the changed look in his colleagues' eyes. There was respect, maybe even some confusion. The Ethan they knew, efficient, focused solely on work, with no time for sentimental distractions, was changing before their eyes. One Thursday afternoon, arriving at the orphanage, Ethan found Grace waiting for him excitedly. "I have a surprise," she announced as soon as she saw him. "I do too," he replied, showing her a gift bag. "You first," Grace insisted. Ethan handed her the bag. Inside was a small tablet. "It's for your drawings," he explained. "There's a special drawing app. I thought it might help on days when your fingers hurt after physical therapy." Grace stared at the device with wide eyes. "Is it just for me? I don't have to share." "Just for you. But you can show your drawings to anyone you like, of course." She hugged the tablet to her chest, touched by the gift. "Now my surprise," she said, still emotional. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "I made this today." It was a simple drawing. Ethan and Grace side by side, holding hands with a smiling sun above them. Below, in carefully drawn childish letters, was written, "My family." Ethan felt something break and rebuild inside him. "I know we're not a real family," Grace quickly explained, interpreting his silence as disapproval. "It's just, you come here all the time, and you care. Like parents should." Ethan folded the paper carefully and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his heart. "This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received," he said, his voice thick with emotion. That night, when he got home, Ethan pinned the drawing to his fridge. He stared at it for a long time, thinking about how his life had changed so completely in such a short time. 3 months ago, his routine was predictable. Wake up, work, occasionally have dinner with a client or colleague, sleep, repeat. A productive, organized life, but one devoid of genuine connection. Now his days had a new purpose. He still worked hard, still was the same successful businessman, but the best part of his day wasn't closing a deal or finishing a project. It was seeing Grace's smile when he arrived at the orphanage, hearing her stories, watching her progress. The place that had once been just a point on his GPS, a stop to drop off a check, had become his refuge. There, with Grace, Ethan had found something he never knew he was searching for. A space where he could simply be himself, without the masks and expectations of the corporate world. Grace had taught him to see the world through new eyes, eyes that appreciated small victories, that saw beauty in simple gestures, that recognized value beyond money. And in return, he offered her what he could: consistency, genuine attention, and the silent promise that he would never disappear. Looking at the drawing on his fridge, Ethan finally admitted to himself what his heart already knew. That little girl in a wheelchair had become the most important person in his life. Winter arrived early that year. Ethan parked his car in his usual spot, now informally reserved for him. He noticed the Christmas decorations being set up at the orphanage entrance. Even though it was still November, the kids were excited about the upcoming holidays. Entering the foyer, he found it busier than usual. A volunteer team was organizing donated toys, winter clothes, and food. Claire managed it all with her typical efficiency, assigning tasks and giving instructions. "Ethan, glad you're here," she greeted him. "Grace had physical therapy today and is resting a bit. She should be ready in about 15 minutes. "That's fine, I can wait. Actually, if you could come to my office, there's something I'd like to discuss with you." Ethan felt a twinge of worry. In 2 months of regular visits, Claire had never asked him for a private talk. He followed her down the hallway in silence, mentally reviewing the past few weeks, trying to see if he had done anything wrong. Claire's office was small but cozy, its walls lined with children's drawings in frames and photos of smiling kids, success stories of the orphanage, presumably. She gestured to a comfortable chair and sat behind her desk. "Coffee? Tea?" "I'm fine, thank you," Ethan replied, still tense. "Did something happen with Grace?" Claire smiled, apparently sensing his apprehension. "Grace is doing great. Actually, she's better than I've ever seen her since she arrived here. That's what I want to talk about." Ethan visibly relaxed. "Your visits have made an extraordinary difference in her life," Claire went on. "You've become a constant presence she never had, someone who keeps promises, who shows up when they say they will." "I'm not doing anything special," Ethan said, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just enjoy spending time with her. It's more than that, and we both know it." Claire studied him with discerning eyes. "You rearranged your whole life to include her, and I'm deeply grateful. But I think the time has come for you to fully understand who Grace is." Claire opened a drawer and took out a thin folder. "This is her file. Normally, these details are confidential, but since you've become a constant in her life, I believe you should know the full story." Ethan accepted the folder carefully, as if it contained something fragile. "Grace arrived at our orphanage a little over a year ago. Before that, she lived with her parents in a suburb north of the city. Her mother, Olivia Reed, was a music teacher. Her father, Michael Reed, worked as an architect." Ethan raised his eyebrows at the father's profession. An architect. Interesting how it wasn't too different from Ethan's own real estate work. Maybe that explained Grace's interest in buildings. From what we gathered, they were a happy and stable family. Claire continued. Grace was born without complications. She had a normal, healthy early childhood. She'd just begun piano lessons with her mum, and she showed aptitude for music and drawing. Claire paused, as though bracing for the difficult part of the story. On a rainy night, the three of them were driving back from a relative's birthday. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit their car. The impact was on the passenger side, where Olivia was sitting. She died instantly. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest, imagining the terror of that night. Grace was in the back seat. The impact caused a spinal cord injury, affecting her legs. Michael escaped physically unscathed for the most part. Claire took a sip of water before continuing. Doctors say with continuous physical therapy and possibly future procedures, Grace could regain some mobility. There are no guarantees, but there's hope. However, the emotional trauma... She sighed. Michael stayed by Grace's side during her initial hospital stay. He seemed determined to help her recover, but as the weeks went on, we saw changes in his behavior. He became distant, absent. The social workers reported that he began drinking, missing Grace's medical appointments. Ethan felt rising anger as he listened, but he remained silent. 6 weeks after the accident, Michael left Grace here. He said it was temporary, just until he got his life together. He signed a temporary guardianship form and promised to return in a few days. Claire looked directly at Ethan. He never came back. He sent a few emails in the first months, asking about her, but those messages grew rarer until they stopped. We tried to contact him many times, but he moved away without leaving an address. Eventually, after the required legal period, the court granted the state full guardianship over Grace. Ethan opened the folder and saw a picture of a younger Grace smiling next to a woman with light brown hair. Her mother, presumably. The resemblance was striking. Another photo showed a tall, bespectacled man holding baby Grace with a proud expression. Michael wasn't a bad man, Claire said gently. At least I don't believe he was. Social workers who met him said he simply broke. The guilt was overwhelming. He had been driving that night. In his lucid moments, he admitted he couldn't bear to look at Grace and see Olivia in her, and that every time he saw the wheelchair, he was reminded that it was his fault she ended up there. It wasn't his fault, Ethan protested. It was the drunk driver's. Yes, but grief and guilt aren't always rational. Michael lost the wife he loved and saw his daughter lose her mobility all in one instant. Some people just can't handle that kind of pain. Ethan flipped through more pages. Medical reports, psychological evaluations, school progress updates. How did she cope with all this? At first it was hard. Grace waited every day for her father. She asked about him constantly. As time passed, the questions lessened. She withdrew, became quiet and reserved. We thought it was just a phase, but it lasted a long time. Claire smiled slightly. Until you showed up. From your first visits, we noticed changes. She went back to drawing enthusiastically, participating in activities, smiling. The therapist says Grace is finally processing her grief in a healthy way. And we believe it's because of your presence. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He wasn't just a casual visitor in Grace's life. He'd become an anchor, a connection to the world she had lost. Why tell me all this now? Claire gently closed the folder. Because Grace started talking about you as family. And we have to be very careful about the expectations we create for her. She's already suffered a traumatic abandonment. She can't go through that again. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. I'm committed to her. I'm not going to vanish from her life. I believe you, but as director here, I must be realistic. Life can be unpredictable. Jobs change, relationships begin, priorities shift. Not mine, Ethan said with surprising conviction, even to himself. Grace is my priority now. Claire studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the truth in his words. I believe you, Ethan, and I trust your intentions. But from my position, I need to be realistic. What kind of relationship do you see with Grace in the long run? Will visits be enough for you both? The question lingered in the air between them. Ethan had thought about it, of course. But hearing Claire say it made it concrete, urgent. I'm not entirely sure, he admitted finally. I just know I want to be in her life. I want to watch her grow, learn, overcome challenges. I want Mutti to be there for everything." "That sounds a lot like what a father would want," Claire noted softly. Ethan didn't respond immediately. The word father carried enormous weight, a commitment he'd never considered for himself before meeting Grace. "I think Grace is ready for our talk now," Claire said, standing up. "Think about what we discussed, Ethan, and know that I'm here to help whatever path you decide." As they walked through the corridor, Ethan processed everything he had just heard. The full story of Grace was even more tragic than he had imagined, but it explained so much. Her early maturity, her caution with adult promises, her fear of being abandoned again. Turning a corner, he saw Grace waiting in the activity room. When she spotted him, her face lit up with a smile that warmed Ethan inside. She rolled her chair toward him enthusiastically. "You took a long time today. I have so much to show you." "Sorry I'm late. I was talking with Ms. Claire." Grace looked from one to the other, suddenly serious. "Were you talking about me?" "Yes," Ethan said honestly. "Claire was telling me how much you've improved in physical therapy. It wasn't the entire truth, but it was truth enough for now." Grace smiled, proud. "Dr. Patricia said, I'm making progress. Yesterday I managed to stand with the parallel bars for almost a whole minute." "That's amazing, Grace." "I'm so proud of you." Claire watched the interaction with a gentle smile. "I'll let you two have some time. Ethan, we can continue our conversation another day." Once Claire left, Grace immediately pulled Ethan over to see her new drawings. She had created a comic on the tablet he'd given her, about a girl detective who solved mysteries in her city. "The main character's name is Emma," Grace explained excitedly. "She uses a wheelchair, but that doesn't stop her from being the best detective in town." "That's an awesome story, Grace. You should show it to other kids." "You think so? What if they don't like it?" "Then you show it to other people until you find those who do. That's how it goes with creations. Not everyone will love them, but the right people will." Grace nodded, absorbing the advice. "Did you know the library is having a Christmas party?" she asked, abruptly changing the subject. "There'll be music, stories, and even Santa Claus. Sounds fun." "It does, but..." Her voice softened, hesitant. "But what?" "I'm not sure I can go. It's outside the orphanage, and sometimes we don't have enough volunteers to take all the kids, especially those who need extra help like me." Ethan felt a pang as he realized how even small events like a Christmas party could be complicated for Grace. "When's the party?" "Next Saturday at 2 o'clock. I'll talk to Claire." "I'm sure we can figure something out." Grace's eyes widened. "You'd take me?" "Of course I would. If Claire allows it, it would be my pleasure." Grace clapped her hands, excited. "Can we stay the whole time? Until the end? And maybe have hot chocolate afterward?" "We can do all that and more." The rest of the afternoon passed quickly with drawings, stories, and plans for the library party. When it was time for Ethan to leave, Grace accompanied him to the foyer, something she rarely did. "Ethan?" "Yes? Do you think I'll ever have a real family?" The question, so direct and vulnerable, caught Ethan off guard. He knelt down to her eye level. "Grace, what do you mean by a real family?" She thought for a moment. "People who stay together even when it's hard, who don't leave, who care if you're sad or happy, who help you be better." Ethan smiled gently. "By your definition, you already have a family. Everyone here at the orphanage cares about you, and so do I." Grace shook her head. "It's not the same. This place is temporary. Everyone knows it. Kids come and go. Adults work here, then go home to their own families." Ethan felt the weight of her truth. As caring as the orphanage was, and as dedicated as its staff were, it would never be a permanent home. Never be enough. "I believe you will have that family one day, Grace. Someone will see how special you are and want to be in your life forever." "How will I know who that person is?" she asked, her serious eyes seeming to see right through him. "You'll know," Ethan replied, feeling a knot in his throat. "Your heart will tell you." Grace studied him for a long moment, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "My heart is already talking," she finally said. "I just don't know if the other person is listening." Before Ethan could respond, Melissa arrived to take Grace to dinner. The girl waved one last time before disappearing down the corridor, leaving Ethan with her words echoing in his mind. Driving back through the city already adorned for Christmas, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about his conversation with Claire and Grace's words. The full story of the little girl, her mother's tragic death and, in a way, her father's as well, only increased his admiration for her. What strength must it take to move forward after such losses? And what about him? Claire had asked the right question. What kind of relationship did he want with Grace long term? Would visits, however frequent and meaningful, be enough? For her or for him? Ethan now knew the answer. No, visits wouldn't be enough. Grace deserved more stability, permanence, a place to call home. She deserved a family that wouldn't vanish when things got tough. Stopped at a red light, Ethan made a decision that would change his life forever. Grace deserved a real family, and he wanted to be that family. The law office had a solemn air, fitting for the weight of the decisions made there. Ethan waited in the reception area, mentally rehearsing the questions he needed to ask. The walls, adorned with diplomas and certificates, seemed intimidating, a reminder of the seriousness of what he was considering. "Mr. Mitchell, Doctor. Winters will see you now." The family law attorney came highly recommended by a colleague. Tall, with grey hair neatly pinned in a bun, Patricia Winters exuded competence and experience. "Mr. Mitchell, welcome. I understand you'd like to discuss a possible adoption." "Yes. I'm considering adopting a specific child, a 4-year-old girl I know from volunteer work." Ethan explained briefly about Grace and the situation at the orphanage. The attorney listened carefully, making occasional notes. "And the biological father? From what I understand, he voluntarily relinquished guardianship." "Yes. Over a year ago. According to the orphanage director, he hasn't responded to any attempts at contact for months." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "Do you have any prior experience with children?" "No," Ethan admitted. "I never considered having kids until I met Grace. You're aware that adopting a child with special needs comes with additional challenges, both emotional and practical, as well as financial." "Yes, I am." They talked for almost an hour. Patricia explained the legal process, the requirements, and the necessary evaluations. When Ethan left the office, he held a folder of information and preliminary forms. The reality of adoption was starting to take concrete shape. In the car, he didn't start the engine right away. He glanced at the folder on the passenger seat, feeling a wave of doubt wash over him. Was he really prepared for this? He drove home in silence, with no radio for company. Arriving at his apartment, he dropped his keys on the coffee table and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, lights dotting the evening sky. His phone rang. It was Marcus from the office, asking about a contract. Ethan answered mechanically, his mind split between work and the more personal matters awaiting him. After hanging up, he looked around his apartment. The place was a reflection of himself. Organized, minimalist, functional, designed for a single man focused on his career. No traces of family life, no space for scattered toys or drawings on the fridge. What would it be like to turn this into a home for a child? Where would Grace's room go? Were the doors wide enough for her wheelchair? Would the bathroom need adaptations? More importantly, would he himself need to adapt? Ethan poured himself a drink and sat on the couch. The fears he had kept at bay now emerged, impossible to ignore. What if he wouldn't be a good father? Growing up without a father figure left him with no model to follow. What did he know about raising a child? Discipline, routines, education. Handling nightmares, sickness, tantrums. What if Grace realized he wasn't up to the task? That he had made a mistake in thinking he could be her family? And his deepest fear, what if he failed her the way his own father had failed him? When things got tough, and they inevitably would, what if he discovered he didn't have what it took to keep going? He picked up his phone again and opened his photo gallery. There was Grace, and smiling at the camera during their trip to the library. Another photo showed her proudly displaying a drawing. In all the images, a light shone in her eyes that hadn't been there when they first met. Would it be fair to risk snuffing out that light if he couldn't fulfill his silent promise to stay forever? Ethan ran his hand over his face, feeling the weight of the decision. Adopting Grace would mean redesigning his entire life, his work, his priorities, even his physical space. For years, he had built his identity around his career. He was the successful businessman, the relentless negotiator, the man who didn't need anyone. He was an expert at keeping people at a safe distance, at avoiding vulnerability. Now he was considering bringing someone into his life who would depend on him completely. Someone who would see his flaws, his insecurities, his weaknesses. Someone whose happiness would be tied to his decisions and capabilities. The phone rang again. It was Claire. "Ethan, sorry to call so late. I just wanted to let you know Grace had a fever this afternoon. Nothing serious, it's probably just a cold ikame, but I thought you'd want to know. She asked if you're still coming tomorrow." The immediate worry he felt was almost physical. "Of course I'll come. Is she better now? Does she need anything? I can stop by the pharmacy, get some medicine." "Ethan," Claire interrupted gently, "she's fine. The fever broke already. Our nurse is keeping an eye on her. I just wanted to keep you informed." After hanging up, Ethan remained motionless, reflecting on his instant reaction. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't calculated implications or considered alternatives. He had simply felt a primal need to help, to be there. Wasn't that what parents did? He picked up the attorney's folder again. Among the documents was a preliminary questionnaire for prospective adoptive parents. Questions about motivation, expectations, family structure, financial and emotional resources. He began filling it out, determined to be honest. No, he had no experience with children. No, he didn't have a large family support network. Yes, his job demanded long hours. No, he hadn't planned on being a single father. Then came the final question. Why do you wish to adopt this specific child? Ethan paused, pen hovering over the paper. The obvious answers, compassion, concern, responsibility, felt inadequate. He thought of Grace, her smile, her bravery, her wisdom beyond her age. After a few minutes, he wrote simply, "Because she taught me what family is." He closed the folder and walked around his apartment, seeing it with new eyes. The guest room could become Grace's bedroom. The white walls could be painted in the lilac she loved so much. He'd have to buy a new bed, shelves for books and toys, maybe a small digital piano since her mother had begun teaching her music. The bathroom would need grab bars, a shower seat. The kitchen would have to be rearranged so she could reach what she needed. He'd need to research nearby schools, check their accessibility, maybe even consider moving to a single-story home. But those were only practical details. What truly scared him was the magnitude of emotional responsibility. How would he balance discipline and freedom? How would he help Grace process her past trauma while they built a future together? What about bad days? When the absence of her mother felt heavier, when physical limitations caused frustration, when comparisons to other children were inevitable. Ethan returned to the window, watching the city asleep. The truth was, he didn't have all the answers. He might never have them. Perhaps being a parent was exactly that. Navigating without a complete map, learning as you go, constantly adapting. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire, a photo of Grace sleeping soundly, hugging the stuffed bear he'd given her last month. Under the photo, a simple message: "Fever's gone completely." "She's asking for a double story tomorrow to make up for the bad day." Ethan smiled at the screen. There she was, so small and yet so resilient, a girl who had faced more loss and challenges in 4 years than many do in a lifetime, yet she still worried about getting 2 stories the next day. It wouldn't be easy. Mistakes would be inevitable. There would be days of doubt, exhaustion, and frustration for both of them. But maybe the question wasn't whether he was fully prepared. Maybe it was whether he was willing to learn, grow, and adapt for her sake. Whether he was willing to face his fears rather than letting them paralyze him. Watching that photo of Grace sleeping, Ethan felt the answer rise inside him. Not as absolute certainty, but as a quiet determination. Yes, for her, he was willing. The meeting was supposed to end at 3 in the afternoon. Enough time for Ethan to drive to the orphanage and spend at least an hour with Grace before dinner. That was the perfect plan, until the main investor, Mr. Takahashi, decided to bring his entire legal team to review every line of the contract. Ethan glanced at the clock discreetly as the lawyers debated contractual fine points. 3:30, 4 o'clock, 4:30. "Mr. Mitchell, do you have an urgent appointment?" Mr. Takahashi asked, noticing Ethan's frequent looks at the clock. "No, sir. Just tracking our progress." The lie came easily. How could he explain to a group of executives that he was anxious to visit a 4-year-old girl? This deal represented millions for the company, the expansion of an entire commercial complex. In the corporate hierarchy of priorities, it unquestionably ranked above a personal visit. So why did he feel so uneasy? Under the table, he grabbed his phone and sent a message to Claire. "Stuck in an important meeting. Can't leave right now. Please explain to Grace that I won't make it today, but I'll come tomorrow for sure. Sorry for the inconvenience." Her answer came minutes later. "Understood. I'll let her know. See you tomorrow." Short and professional. But Ethan couldn't stop imagining how Grace would take the news. It was the first time he'd missed a visit since he'd started coming regularly. The meeting dragged on until 7 at night. When it finally ended, Mr. Takahashi seemed pleased. "Excellent work, Mitchell. You've built a solid proposal. My team will finalize the details tomorrow, but consider the deal done." Under any other circumstances, Ethan would have celebrated. It was the biggest contract he had ever negotiated, a landmark in his career. But today, the victory felt hollow. He drove home on autopilot, torn between the closed deal and the missed commitment. When he arrived at his apartment, he realized he couldn't relax. He picked up the phone and called the orphanage, even though it was well past visiting hours. Melissa answered. "Hope Children's Home. Good evening." "Melissa, it's Ethan Mitchell. I know it's late, but..." "How did Grace react when she found out I wasn't coming?" There was an uncomfortable pause on the other end. "She was pretty upset, Mr. Mitchell. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Then she got quiet for the rest of the afternoon. She didn't want dinner." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of those words. "I see. Is she sleeping now?" "Yes, she fell asleep about an hour ago. Claire stayed with her until she dozed off." "Thanks, Melissa. I'll be there tomorrow no matter what." After hanging up, Ethan couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, picturing Grace waiting for him, watching the door every time someone passed by, disappointment growing each minute. He knew that feeling well, waiting for someone who would never come. The difference was his father had never promised to return. Ethan had. The next morning, he arrived at the orphanage right after the children's breakfast. He hadn't told anyone he'd come so early, but Claire didn't seem surprised to see him. "She's in the activity room," she said simply. Ethan found Grace at the usual table, coloring without much enthusiasm. When she spotted him at the door, her expression changed. Surprise, joy, and then, as if remembering she was supposed to be upset, a forced seriousness. "Hi, Grace." "Hi." Her response was curt, lacking her usual excitement. Ethan sat down beside her, noticing she wouldn't look directly at him. "I'm really sorry I didn't come yesterday." Grace shrugged and continued coloring. "It's okay, you have important things to do." The words sounded so adult and understanding on the surface, but they were loaded with all the hurt she was trying to hide. "I was in a meeting I couldn't postpone, a very big job for my company." "I know, Ms. Claire told me." Her voice was small, controlled. "Work is important." Ethan realized rational explanations wouldn't matter. To Grace, no matter how big the meeting was, what mattered was he hadn't shown up. He had broken an unspoken promise, just like other adults in her life had done. "Grace, look at me, please." She hesitated, but finally lifted her eyes. Ethan saw fear there, not anger or disappointment, but genuine fear. "Do you think I won't come back?" he asked softly. Her eyes welled with tears, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. "That's how it started with my dad. First, he missed once, then again, then he stopped coming." Ethan's heart twisted. Of course she'd make that connection. How could she not? "Grace, I'm not your dad." He paused, realizing how that sounded. "What I mean is I won't vanish like he did. Yesterday was an exception, not the start of a pattern." "How do I know?" Her question was direct, raw in its simplicity. Ethan thought carefully. Empty promises meant nothing to her. She needed something tangible. Do you know what a contract is, Grace? She frowned, thinking, it's like a written promise. Mr. Jason, the teacher, told us about that when we studied about jobs. Exactly. It's an official promise between people. Ethan picked up a piece of paper and a pen from the table. Let's make a contract, you and I. Grace watched with curiosity as he wrote in large, clear letters, contract between Ethan Mitchell and Grace Reed. Ethan Mitchell, solemnly promise that I will always give advance notice if I can't visit Grace on a scheduled day. I will always explain the real reason for any absence. I will always return, no matter what happens. I will never, ever disappear from Grace's life. Ethan signed his name and dated the document, then slid it toward Grace. Contracts have to be signed by all parties involved. Will you sign too? Grace studied the paper, reading each line carefully. Then, with the seriousness of someone signing an international treaty, she wrote her name in large, uneven letters. Now it's official, Ethan declared, and contracts can't be broken without serious consequences. What kind of consequences? Ethan thought for a moment. If I break any of these promises, you get to pick the ice cream flavor we eat for a whole year. Grace grimaced, then gave a small smile. I choose mint chocolate every single time. You hate mint chocolate. Exactly. That's why I won't break the contract. Ethan folded the paper and handed it to her. Keep this. It's your guarantee. Grace took the paper and carefully placed it in her pocket. Her face no longer showed the same tension, but Ethan knew it would take time to fully rebuild the shaken trust. What were you drawing? He asked, trying to return things to normal. Grace pulled the paper closer. Nothing important, but Ethan had already seen enough. It was a drawing of a house with a figure that looked like him at the door and a smaller figure in a wheelchair outside, looking in. The image hit him like a punch. That was how she felt on the outside, looking in at something she couldn't reach. First with her biological father, now with him. I can stay the whole morning today, he said, and come back in the afternoon after lunch if you want. Grace's eyes lit up. All day? All day? She thought for a moment. Can we go out for a little while? To the park nearby. I don't leave here much except for the patio. If Claire allows it, yes. The morning was spent strolling through the park, where Grace pointed out birds and interesting clouds. At lunch, Ethan joined her in the cafeteria, ignoring the curious looks from other children. In the afternoon, he read stories to her and any child who wanted to listen. By the time he had to leave, Grace seemed more relaxed, more secure. Are you coming back tomorrow? Yes, as always. She nodded confidently again. On his way to the parking lot, Claire caught up with him. I noticed you spent the entire day here. I had to make up for yesterday's mistake. Claire gave him a gentle smile. You know, Ethan, most people would have just shown up, apologized, and moved on. Few truly understand how missing one day without an explanation can affect a child with Grace's history. I think I understand, because I went through something similar, Ethan admitted. The difference is I never had anyone come back to explain. They walked in silence for a few moments. I've been thinking a lot, Claire, about Grace, about myself, about the future. And have you reached any conclusions? Ethan stopped, facing the director with renewed determination. Yes, I want to adopt Grace. Claire didn't look surprised, just thoughtful. Are you sure? This will change your life completely. I'm more certain of this than anything else I've ever decided. It's not out of pity or duty. It's because she filled a void in my life I didn't know existed. He looked up at the orphanage, at the lit windows where children prepared for bedtime. Grace has taught me more about family in these months than I've learned in my entire life. She deserves a permanent home, and I think I deserve a family too. Claire nodded slowly. It won't be an easy process. There will be evaluations, interviews, home visits. As a single man, you'll face extra scrutiny. I'm ready. I'll do whatever it takes. What about your job, your routine, your social life? All of that can be adapted. Grace is the priority now. Claire smiled, for the first time without her usual professional reserve. You know, when you first showed up, I thought you'd be just another well-meaning donor who'd soon forget his way here. I'm happy to admit I was wrong. I couldn't forget the way to Grace if I tried. Then we'll start the process. I'll contact social services tomorrow. In the meantime, just keep visiting as usual. Let's not mention the adoption until we have some level of certainty." Ethan agreed. Walking back to his car, he felt lighter, clearer, as though he'd finally found the right path after years of aimless wandering. That missed visit, painful as it had been for both of them, had crystallized something important. Grace needed consistency, safety, permanence. She needed a home where she would never again fear being abandoned. And Ethan needed Grace just as much as she needed him. Driving back to the city, he made another decision. Tomorrow he would begin searching for a house. Not an apartment, but a real house with a yard where Grace could play. With spacious rooms and wide doors for her chair, with ramps instead of steps. A place they could call home. Together. The adoption process moved at the speed of an hourglass, steady, but slower than Ethan would have liked. It had been 3 months since his initial decision. During that time, social workers had visited his new apartment, chosen specifically for its accessibility, interviewed his co-workers, and scrutinized his financial and emotional life. Grace only knew Ethan was thinking about important things, a vague explanation Claire advised, until they had approval. Even so, the girl seemed to sense something was changing. She asked more questions about his home, about what it would be like to live outside the orphanage, about whether she could have a real cat someday. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Ethan was called into Claire's office. When he entered, he immediately noticed someone else was there. Mrs. Winters, the social worker assigned to the case. "Mr. Mitchell, good afternoon," Mrs. Winters said formally. "We have some news regarding the process." Ethan's heart pounded. "Good or bad?" "Relevant," she replied diplomatically. "During our routine checks, we finally managed to contact Mr. Reed, Grace's biological father." Ethan felt his stomach drop. There was always the possibility the biological father could reappear and contest the adoption. That was his biggest fear. "Does he want to regain custody?" Ethan asked bluntly. "No," Claire interjected. "Actually, well, maybe you should read this." She handed Ethan a plain white envelope, already opened. Inside was a carefully folded sheet of paper with an uneven but legible handwriting. "It's addressed to Grace," Mrs. Winters explained. But as her temporary guardian, Claire had to read it first. "We believe you should see it too." With slightly trembling hands, Ethan pulled out the letter and began to read. "Grace, I hope one day you'll read these words and understand what I couldn't say in person. Losing your mom was like losing part of my soul. When I looked at you, I saw her face and the pain was unbearable. I couldn't deal with the guilt, the sorrow, the feeling that you deserved someone better than me, someone who could love and care for you unconditionally. I wasn't strong enough, and the shame of my weakness pushes me even further away. I know you deserve a family who can truly love you. Please forgive me one day if you can. My greatest wish is that you find happiness and receive the love I couldn't give. With all the love left in my heart, your dad." Ethan finished reading and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. He didn't feel hatred for the man who had abandoned Grace, only a strange mix of understanding and sadness. Her father wasn't a monster. He was a man destroyed by pain, unable to move past his own grief to care for his daughter. He also signed a formal parental rights waiver, Mrs. Winters said, handing Ethan another document. "No contest, no conditions. The path to adoption is legally clear." Ethan looked again at the letter in his hands. "When should Grace receive this?" Claire and Mrs. Winters exchanged glances. "It's your decision," Claire answered. "Legally, the letter belongs to Grace, but as her prospective guardian, you should decide when and how to share it with her." Ethan reread the last lines. "My greatest wish is that you find happiness and receive the love I couldn't give." It was a genuine wish from a father who recognized his own limitations. "I'll keep the letter," Ethan decided. "When Grace is older, when she can understand better, I'll give it to her. For now, it would only add more confusion and pain." Both women nodded in agreement. "With that settled," Mrs. Winters continued in a lighter tone, "I'm pleased to inform you that your adoption request has received a preliminary favorable review. We still have some bureaucratic steps ahead, but if all goes well, within a few weeks we can make it official." The news should have filled Ethan with pure joy, but the letter still weighed in his hands and heart. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters, Claire." He carefully folded the letter and placed it in his jacket's inner pocket. "Can I see Grace now?" "Of course," Claire said, smiling. "She's excited. She asked about you 3 times today already." Walking down the familiar corridor toward the activity room, Ethan reflected on the letter and its author. In another life, under different circumstances, that might have been him, unable to handle the pain, running from emotional responsibilities. But Grace had changed that in him. She showed him it was possible to love even with fear, to move forward even in uncertainty. Entering the room, he saw Grace absorbed in drawing, her tongue sticking out in concentration. When she noticed him, her face lit up. "Ethan, come see what I'm drawing." Sitting beside her, Ethan saw a picture of a house with a garden, an orange cat, and 2 figures holding hands, a big one and a small one. "It's our dream house," Grace explained, "for when I leave here someday." Ethan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the letter in his pocket near his heart. "It's beautiful, Grace. I hope all your dreams come true." In that moment, he made a silent promise not only to Grace, but also to the man who had written those painful words. He would honor every line of that letter. He would give Grace the love, safety, and happiness her biological father couldn't. Not from lack of heart, but from lack of strength. And one day, when Grace was ready, he would give her the letter as a bridge, not a wound, so she would understand that sometimes love exists even when people can't stay, and that leaving doesn't always mean not loving. An anxious silence hung in Claire's office. She had asked Ethan to arrive earlier than usual that day, before his regular visit to Grace. The final approval for the adoption had arrived the previous night, a simple email that would change 2 lives forever. "I think it's time," Claire said, checking her watch. "Grace should be finishing breakfast. I'll go get her." Ethan nodded, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. He had chosen it especially for the occasion. Never in his life had he felt such a mix of anxiety and hope. While he waited, his eyes traveled around Claire's office, the same framed drawings, the same photographs, the same calendar with colorful reminders. But today, everything seemed different, as if seen through a new lens. This place, which had been completely unfamiliar a few months ago, was now part of his history. And soon it would become just a memory, no longer a daily stop. He heard voices approaching in the corridor, Claire's calm, steady tone and Grace's inquisitive, slightly puzzled one. "But it's not time for my visit yet. Ethan always comes after lunch on Thursdays," Grace said. "Today is special," Claire replied softly, opening the door. Grace entered, glancing from Claire to Ethan with a curious expression. She wore a light blue blouse and jeans, her hair in a messy braid she'd probably done herself. "Good morning, Grace," Ethan greeted her, smiling nervously. "Morning," she replied, studying him intently. "You look different today. Is it that tie?" Ethan laughed, relaxing a bit. "Yes, it's new." "Do you like it?" Grace shrugged. "It's pretty, but you look nervous wearing it." Claire indicated the chair beside Ethan. "Grace, sweetheart, there's something important I need to talk to you about. Something very special." Grace looked wary, gripping the arms of her wheelchair, a gesture Ethan knew as a sign of anxiety. "Am I in trouble?" she asked softly. "No, not at all." Claire sat facing her, leaning in slightly. "It's actually wonderful news. Remember when we talked about families, about how some children find new parents?" Grace nodded slowly, her eyes darting between Claire and Ethan, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. "Well, someone very special has expressed the wish to be your family, to adopt you, Grace." For a moment, the little girl was completely still. Then, almost in slow motion, she turned to Ethan, a silent question in her wide eyes. Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion, but managed to speak. "Yes, Grace. I'd like very much to be your family." "If you'd like that too." Grace's expression cycled through so many emotions so quickly that it was hard to keep up. Shock, confusion, joy, fear, hope, all mixing on her small face. Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. "You want to be my dad?" Her voice was barely audible. "Yes," Ethan answered simply. "More than anything in the world." "You'd have your own house, Grace," Claire explained gently. "You'd live with Ethan. He'd be responsible for you, take you to school, to physical therapy, like a father." Grace looked down at her hands, now clenched in her lap. "You don't have to answer now," Ethan added quickly. "I know it's a big decision, something huge to think about." But Grace was already shaking her head. "I don't need to think. I want it." She lifted her gaze, determined despite the tears. "But I have a question." "Any question," Ethan encouraged. "Will you stay even when I grow up? When I'm not little and cute anymore?" The question was heavy with real fear and deep insecurity. What if I never walk properly? What if it's hard to take care of me? Ethan's heart clenched. He moved from the chair to kneel in front of her, so their eyes were level. Gently, he took her small hands in his. "Grace, listen carefully. I'm going to tell you something very important, and I promise it with all my heart." He paused, making sure he had her full attention. "I will stay every day you want me. When you're a teenager and think I'm the lamest dad in the world, when you grow up and want your independence, when you're an adult living your own life. It doesn't matter if you walk, dance, or use a wheelchair forever. It doesn't matter if things are easy or hard. You will never, ever be a burden to me." A tear finally escaped, rolling down Grace's cheek. Ethan gently wiped it away. "Do you know why?" he continued. "Because you changed my life. Before I met you, I had a house but no home. I had success but not real joy. I was alive, but I wasn't truly living." Grace stared at him, soaking in each word like dry soil absorbs rain. "So, you need me too?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. "More than you can imagine," Ethan replied, voice trembling. "We're a team now, and teams stick together." Without warning, Grace leaned forward and threw her arms around Ethan's neck, hugging him with all the strength her small body could muster. Ethan hugged her back gently, feeling her tears soak into his shirt. Claire watched with an emotional smile, discreetly wiping away her own tear. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Final paperwork, last interviews, visits to Ethan's new apartment so Grace could get comfortable there. Ethan had finally found the perfect place, a ground-floor unit in a quiet complex wall, with easy access and enough space for a wheelchair to move around comfortably. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Grace had sessions with a psychologist to prepare her for the transition. She also spent time saying goodbye to the friends and staff who had been her temporary family for so long. Melissa helped her pack her few belongings, clothes, books, the worn stuffed bear she'd had since she was a baby, her drawings and the special notebook Ethan had given her, and the tablet she used for her comic stories. On her last night at the orphanage, Claire sat on the edge of Grace's bed. "Nervous about tomorrow?" she asked gently. Grace nodded. "A little." "What if I don't know how to live in a real house?" Claire smiled. "You'll learn. And Ethan is learning to be a dad too. You'll figure it out together, day by day." The next morning, Ethan arrived early, carrying a bouquet of yellow daisies, Grace's favorites. The small farewell ceremony was simple yet emotional. The other children made cards, the staff gave her hugs, and Claire handed Grace a framed photo of the whole group. "So you'll always remember you have a lot of people rooting for you," the director said. The hardest moment was when Grace had to say goodbye to Sophia, the reading volunteer who had become especially close to her. "I'll miss you on Thursdays," Grace said, fighting back tears. "I'll come visit," Sophia promised, "and we'll keep doing our stories." Finally, with the documents in hand and hearts full of hope mixed with a touch of fear, Ethan helped Grace into his car. In the back seat, she watched through the window as the orphanage grew smaller in the distance, one chapter of her life closing and a new one beginning. The drive to Ethan's new apartment was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Ethan parked and looked at Grace through the rearview mirror. "Ready to see your new home?" Grace took a deep breath and nodded. The apartment had a small front garden with a path of smooth stones perfect for her wheelchair. Ethan unlocked the door, letting Grace enter first, watching her reaction. The living room was spacious and bright, decorated in soft blues and greens. A low bookshelf held children's books mixed with Ethan's. On the wall hung a large framed print of a drawing Grace had made of them months before. "Want to see your room?" Ethan asked, trying to contain his own nerves. Grace nodded, following him down the hallway. When Ethan opened the door, she was momentarily speechless. The room was simple but perfect for her. The walls were painted a soft lilac, her favorite color. The bed was at a comfortable height, so she could transfer easily from her chair. There was a modified desk, low shelves filled with books and games, and a small keyboard in the corner, a tribute to the mother who had started teaching her piano. But what made Grace's eyes widen was the large window overlooking a small backyard garden, where an orange cat was dozing in the sun. "Is that—" she began, unable to finish. "Popcorn," Ethan confirmed with a smile. "I adopted him from the animal shelter yesterday. They assured me he's very patient and gentle, perfect for a first-time owner." Grace rolled her chair slowly around the room, touching things as if she couldn't believe they were real. When she finally turned to Ethan, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. She held his hand and said with a shy smile, "Now I have a little corner that's mine. And yours, too." Ethan felt his heart overflow. He knelt beside her chair and answered warmly, "Our corner." Grace looked around once more, at the space that was now her home, at the cat that was her new friend, at the man who was now her father. For so long, she had believed nobody would ever choose her, that she would never have a real family. Now suddenly she had everything she'd ever dreamed of. "Can I call you Dad?" she asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. Ethan felt a depth of emotion he could hardly express. "It would be the greatest honor of my life." In that perfect moment, they were enveloped by a feeling of belonging and love. Not the end of a journey, but the beginning of a far richer one. A journey they would continue together, father and daughter. Two hearts that had found a home in each other. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.